Hello and welcome to another how-to TTRPG. I'm Rogue Maverick, and today we're talking about Thirsty Sword Lesbians, a role-playing game centered on queer love, power, identity, and inclusion. Players take on the roles of sword-wielding heroes known as the titular Thirsty Sword Lesbians as they navigate their way through dangerous and romantic adventures. Kind of like Xena. Or I'm sure you could come up with 1,000 different anime that could fit that basis. The game itself is based on Powered by the Apocalypse, and if you're familiar with that, then you already know what's going on. If you're not familiar with the system, well, you've come to the right place. This game has innovative mechanics that allow for fluid and dynamic storytelling. It's also been praised for its accessibility to players of all experience level and emphasis on creating a safe and welcoming space for queer players to explore their identities and stories. This encourages players to cooperate in storytelling with a focus on character development and exploration of themes related to identity, relationships, and power dynamics. Each of our characters come with a playbook, and they come with some central conflicts. When looking over the playbooks, I recommend that you find a conflict that speaks to you, especially if this is your first time playing a tabletop. You want something that you can easily identify with so that it's easier to slip into and out of character. For the tutorial today, I've chosen the Scoundrel because I like that conflict of the urge to explore new horizons versus committing to purpose or security. I feel that that's something that I could play relatively well and have a lot of fun with. As I dive in, I'm going to choose my stats, and then I'm going to choose some moves. And the first thing we need to do is we need to give our character a name, then we need to give our character some pronouns. How do we want to be addressed? What do we want to be called? After that, we can look at archetypes, and we can look at aesthetics. The book gives us some wonderful archetypes. So for the Scoundrel, you could be a Shimbo pirate, or a diva fencing champion, or a dashing jewel thief, or anything else that fits that hero of action and intense physicality. Anything with banter and flirtation. With the aesthetics, you have a lot of different ways that you could look. I prefer a playful demeanor, revealing clothes, and a flashy sword. I feel that that fits this character and that I'm going to have a lot of fun with that. For my stats, what we do, and we're looking at D20 right now, we choose one of these two items. And then we add one each to two different stats. So, I'm going to pick the second one here because I'm going to up that heart, but I like starting with wit. And starting with no wit, that doesn't fly for me. So, I'm going to go with that second stat block, and then I'm going to go in and improve my heart by 1 to get it up to 0. And then let's add a little grace and pull that up to 1. And there we go. That's our stats. Next, we go through and we look at some moves. And moves are just the actions that your character can take that require dice rolls. For this Scoundrel, I'm looking over Better to Seek Forgiveness, and the problem that I have with that is that it requires me to roll a 7 or higher. I don't want to be dependent on dice rolls, at least at the beginning of the game. I want to be able to do flashy, fun, and crazy things because that's my playstyle. Most of the rogues that I play, or Scoundrels, tend to have a flair for excitement and danger. I'm going to choose one in every port because I like that when I return to a town that I've been to before, I can name a person and talk about how I left things. And if I intentionally say that I left things on a bad term, I get XP for it. I also get some interesting information about what's changed since I was last there. As a role player, that is great for story beats and it helps flesh out my character a little more as they interact with the world. The next one that I want is Rip, and I really like that. That, to me, is a really fun anime kind of thing, so when I narrowly evade a physical blow from someone dangerous, I can declare that some of my clothes were ripped, and I'm now practically indecent. Then for the remainder of the scene, whenever I roll a 10 or higher on any move against an NPC, they have a crush on me. So this again, even though it has that 10 plus on a roll, that is again just a fun role-playing mechanic that creates a lot of interesting, intimate situations, and that's what I'm going for. Because that's in part what this game is about, but in part what is fun to me. And that's it. We've got our character. We know what our aesthetics are, we know what our name is, we know how to introduce ourselves, and we have actions and stats. And to get a better understanding of what these moves do or what the stats do, the next section will go a little bit deeper. Now we're ready to play. As stated before, Thirsty Sword Lesbians is based on Powered by the Apocalypse. And what this means is that you will only ever have 2d6. This is a very dice-light, rules-light, comparatively, system, which, more often than not, those lend more roleplay autonomy than the hardcore rules systems like Dungeons & Dragons or Palladium. For this, a roll can never have an outcome of nothing. We're going to put a little asterisk next to that. Whenever you need to make a move or make a roll, you're going to roll your 2d6, add them up, add any modifiers, and that's your total. In the character creation section, we talked about moves and making a move. And really a move is just a contest. It's something that you would roll dice for. So whenever you roll a 2 6-sided die, you add them up for a number between 2 and 12, and you often add a stat like Daring or Grace. And this is denoted on the playbook by saying roll plus Daring or roll plus Grace. When you score a 10 or higher, the PC generally achieves what they set out to do in a particularly effective way without serious complications. This is known as an upbeat. The general theme for your character is more upbeat. You're succeeding, you're doing well, you're doing awesome, amazing, dramatic things. On a roll of 7 to 9, you can accomplish your aim, but at a cost or with a complication, and this is known as a mixed beat. It's neither fantastic, nor is it awful. On a roll of 6 or less, this is where things get really interesting and even more fun. In most games, failures or lack of high rolls mean something bad happens. That's not entirely the case here, but the GM can describe complications on the characters' lives. And then this is referred to as a GM move. And those are described later on page 84 of the book if you're interested, but those don't concern us today. Now, this doesn't mean that the character failed at a task that they set out to achieve. It just means that it wasn't the best idea for an unforeseen reason or an unexpected complication arises. These are called downbeats. Now, the best thing about a downbeat is that the PC also marks experience. So yeah, go ahead, make those low rolls. You're gonna learn something, your character's going to improve, and that's part of the goal. Diving a little deeper into some of the rules, there are conditions, and the conditions just give you penalties. So if you're angry, you'll have a penalty to different moves, and the 5 conditions are angry, frightened, guilty, hopeless, and insecure. And the core book will dive deeper into those, and I recommend that you talk with your GM on how to handle a lot of those, because it's going to be different from game to game and scene to scene. If you want to clear a condition, someone can offer you the move Emotional Support, and then you can choose which condition to clear. And this happens immediately when they pick the option. Now, of course, providing emotional support doesn't just lead to rewarding roleplay moments, it is also an important way to recover after a confrontation. Once a character is defeated, they are partially deprived of their agency, at least for the rest of the scene. For NPCs, the person who took them out gets to propose how this happens, keeping with the fiction that led to the defeat. So an opposing duelist might surrender or be knocked out or even killed. The pompous aristocrat might be unable to continue arguing because they faint, are bored, or are booed out of the room, or they succumb to poison the trickster slipped in their drink. The GM, or Game Master, can veto proposals that aren't in keeping with the fiction. The Game Master gets to decide how many conditions a particular NPC can take. Some foes may crumble without a single condition, where others may take one or more, and some may only be defeated at one. Some may require all 5. When a powerful adversary suffers a condition, though, they are likely to lash out. Another interesting mechanic in Thirsty Sword Lesbians is the strings mechanic. Strings represent emotional influence over another person, so like, tugging at those heartstrings. When you gain a string on somebody, always make a note of it. You can spend them to influence others for good or ill, and several of the basic moves on a playbook become stronger if you spend a string, and you'll see those throughout. When you gain a 4th string on someone, you have a profound insight and learn something new about them that even they don't know. A player can tell you what you learn, or you could ask the Game Master for ideas. It's up to you whether you share that insight with the character or not. In addition, clear all but one of your strings on them and gain 2 XP. Speaking of XP, let's talk about advancement. Because, what is a game with drama and internal conflict if we're not moving forward? So a PC receives experience whenever they roll a 6 or less, or a move trigger condition is met. Now you can only gain that experience the first time in each scene. Now if you get enough XP, you can advance. So you fill your track and you gain an advancement from the list. You can take another move from your playbook and you can do that twice. You can take a move from any playbook and you can do that twice. You can add 1 stat to whatever, up to a max of 3, and you can do that twice. And after you've done 5 advancements, you can pick one of the interesting advancements, as I call them. You can switch to a new playbook, which really just says that whatever emotional turmoil or conflict you set out with when you built this character, you have resolved it. You've gained enough experience, you've learned, you've grown, you've broken out of your shell. So maybe you resolved those commitment issues, or you overcame whatever it was that you set up at the beginning. That means it's time to become something new if you want to continue playing this character. The other one is Live Happily Ever After, and it tickles me to death that that is actually an advancement in a game. What Live Happily Ever After is just what it sounds like. Your character gets to retire. You describe what your happily ever after is to the rest of the group, and you create a little epilogue for your player character. And it's done. They get to go live out their cottagecore dream, or they start a tavern, or they go out and explore the cosmos. Whatever it is, they get to live happily for the rest of their days. Some final thoughts and takeaways on Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Because this game is all about inclusivity, you don't have to be a lesbian to play the game, and you don't have to be a lesbian character. You can be trans, you can be cis, you can be pretty much whatever you want. The rules absolutely allow for that, and it even calls it out in the core rulebook in various places. Beyond that, just because it's called thirsty doesn't mean that it has to be overly sexual. Thirsty can be platonic. Because they're called sword lesbians doesn't mean that it has to be a fantasy setting. It could be space, it could be Wild West, it could be modern day. Your sword could be a laser sword, or a laser gun, or a laser sword gun. You could play Final Fantasy VIII. It's however you want to do it. The game lends so much to customization and inclusivity that you're not locked in to anything other than what the playbook says, and even then, talking to the GM or the Game Master, you can change it as you need. It is a beautiful system, and one that I think is great for any beginner role player or a veteran as well. There is so much that you can do with this game, and the core book itself comes with half a dozen or so modules for you to run, so that if you're having trouble coming up with stories about anything, they've got them lined out for you. Purchasing this on DriveThru RPG, you get a lot of Roll20 assets, so if that's your jam, absolutely look into those. You get a lot of character icons, a lot of little shields, and some other things that you can do with it, plus all the PDF stuff and the form fillables and all of that. Thanks for sticking around. Please click that subscribe and that like button, it really helps out the channel. If there's a game that you want to see us do one of these on, please drop it down below. If there's anything that I missed, let me know.